What is up, guys, gals, and you awesomeans and gamers of different shapes and sizes? It is me, George, Proxy, bringing you some Let It Die today on the PlayStation 4 Pro, and I would love to know your opinion of it in the comment section below, because this game only came out about 3 days ago. It's completely free to play. It just showed up at PSX. I think a lot of people knew about it originally, but it was kind of like, not many people followed it, you know? I mean, there must have been a few people that were like mega fans, because this game has actually been made by RPMNetwork and Suda51, the people behind Killer 7 and Lollipop Chainsaw and Shadow of the Damned, and I could go on forever. There are so many amazing games by those people, but this is actually their first free-to-play game, and it's really cool actually, because when you think free-to-play, you kind of get a little bit worried. I think a lot of people get quite worried, right? This whole thing of like, oh, it's gonna be some kind of game where they try and bait you into spending loads of cash, you know, instead of actually just playing the game how it is. And it's kind of interesting actually, because I ended up making an article yesterday on proxypayload.com, which basically kind of brings out this idea that maybe Let It Die is the evolution or potentially the death of free-to-play in a good way. And this is because it actually combats the major problems that come with freemium games. Things like trying to bait you into spending actual hard-earned cash. Because obviously, if a free-to-play game has been made, you know, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, but at the same time as that, there is also that kind of thing where they have to try and make money back some way, but never in a clever sense, you know, or never in a respectable sense. And Let It Die actually does it in a really good way, while also still offering you a game that feels like a very kind of like well-made full-price game, which is really awesome. Now, the first thing to explain about when it comes to Let It Die is that it is a free-to-play game. It is also a roguelike, so if you actually think of the games like, say, Dark Souls, or more specifically maybe Bloodborne, because the game has more dodging in it, more dashing and stuff, compared to, say, like Dark Souls, where it was more about blocking, I would probably say. You can still dodge in that game, obviously, but there was still like a massive emphasis on blocking your shields and stuff, while in this game it's all about fast movements and kind of like attacking your enemies at all times and keeping up those combos and things. And so this game pretty much has that thing where you are doing that kind of combat, but at the same time as that if you die, it has that roguelike kind of feeling to it where you will lose all of your stuff. Now, on the side of the narrative, it's actually very cool and very interesting, and one of the main carrots on the end of the stick when it comes to the actual game in general. As you can see, there's actually a really good amount of cutscenes and animation and cinematography, and that's one of the main things about, say, Grasshopper Manufacture when it comes to their games, is that they have very high production values when it actually comes to their narratives, when it comes to their voice acting, and especially their animation. Everything in this game feels like a full-price product, and that is so crazy, because they've even got some really good voice actors in this game, like Mark Hamill's in the game, which is really cool. He actually does the beginning narration, and again, as you can see, the animation is just really good, and it has that feeling to it where you actually feel like you're playing a story, and you are. So the actual story of this game is you're playing as a clone. As you can see here, you end up having to pick a character, either girl or boy, and you wake up on a train all plugged up and stuff like that, and you're kind of going out on your adventure. You're playing as this weird clone, and you have to build this character from scratch. You start as a shell, as you can see in your skivvies. You have just underpants, you know, and for some reason the girl's butt is kind of sticking out. I don't know why. It's kind of like reminds me a little bit of the first Alien film where Sigourney Weaver had those underpants that were like way too small for her. Or maybe her butt cheeks just way too big for the pants, I'm not too sure. But you basically play as this weird clone, and you have to build them up from the very beginning. So you have to level them up, you have to find loot, but over time that loot can actually be lost. And that is something that I want to kind of get into when it comes to the gameplay side of things. Now quickly, I just want to mention again that the characters and the art style and the cinematography and the story and the voice acting is very good. What you just saw there was another character that you actually have in your hub base who kind of helps you with things called like mushrooms. The game's all about mushrooms and using mushrooms to make you better and more awesome and more powerful, and there's actually quite a lot of surprising gameplay mechanics when it comes to this game, and like features and how like deep it is quite surprising. But again, there's actually really good voice acting and just kind of like character creation in this game when it comes to the actual characters that are part of the story, and it's just nice, you know. It's nice to play a free-to-play game where everything has been made so finely tuned and perfect that it doesn't feel like they're trying to make it on the ball. So like say like in a game, say like Warframe, which, you know, they're progressively trying to make the game, but it always feels very kind of like rushed at the start, and then they try and like fine-tune it, but at the same time as that, they try to still make more content and more cutscenes, but it still feels rushed, and they're trying to fix that new content. And this game actually feels like they actually sat down, they made a game, and then they've left you with it. They said, right, now you play it, and now eventually over time I'm going to make more content for it, and you're going to love it. And it's this thing where everything feels so nicely polished. The cutscenes that you saw are very nice nicely polished. They're the staple cutscenes. That's what's going to stay in the game now whenever you play this game, and if you make a new character, if anyone actually starts playing this game again, they will always have those cutscenes, and they will never change. They'll never be updated like, say, in Warframe. The other thing is that the combat, again, is very, very polished, very fluid, as you can see. It plays a little bit like Bloodborne/Dark Souls, where it's this thing where you have to try to time your attacks very, very nicely, and obviously having to kind of like dodge attacks and try and dish out as much damage as possible, but it tries to kind of mix it up a little bit where it doesn't feel very basic, where you're just hacking and slashing and blocking and things. You may have noticed that I did this really cool finishing move, and this is actually this thing where if you stun an enemy, you can actually use the equipped weapon that you have to do a really brutal, it's called a grotesque kill, which is kind of awesome. You also have a special ability called a rage mode ability, which basically is when you equip like any type of weapon, you will have kind of like a super version of that kind of weapon, like an attack, and that's kind of awesome as well. So again, there's a massive amount of depth when it comes to this game and how it plays out within your own combat. Now, when it comes to the loot and such, as you can see here, we actually die at the start of the game, a la kind of like, say, in Dark Souls or Bloodborne, where it kind of like introduces you to the concept of death. And this is kind of the guy that you can play as later on. You can actually build up your character to have all of that type of loot. You can have guns and stuff like that, or you can play melee and things as well. So you've got things like hockey. This is a really cool thing, is that it's not like swords and shields and axes. I mean, you might be able to get an axe, like a fire axe or something later on, but it all feels very grounded and modern, you know? So you're kind of getting things like, say, a pickaxe, or you're getting a fire axe, or you're getting like a giant metal baseball bat or something like that, which is actually one of my favorite weapons in the game so far. And you can even get things like, say, very Dead Rising kind of inspired weapons, so like a firework gun, which obviously fires, well, fireworks, or a very long revolver just because, or you can get things that kind of like makeshift weapons, so like a portable iron, you know, like what you do to kind of like make your clothes really nice and neat and stuff, but it's like, has like a portable battery on it and you can fire steam. You will see me using that in this video. And so all the weapons feel very kind of like put together, very, very kind of like rushed in a sense of how the story and the theme and, you know, everything and the environment plays out. So there's kind of like everyone's kind of like trying to make makeshift weapons and stuff, you know, on the go with like sellotape or duct tape or whatever you kids use on the street these days. And I think that's kind of cool. I think it's this thing where everything feels very kind of dark, it feels very dirty, and the weapons feel like that, which is kind of awesome. And that's actually how the loot plays out. All the weapons in this game, and even like the armor and stuff, are loot. So what you end up having to do is you end up having to fight your way through dungeons. You have to go up the Tower of Barbs, as it's called, as it's actually explaining here in this cutscene. And what you're doing is, the aim of the game is to actually get to the top. So it kind of has that kind of like little bit of a theme of, say, the game Catherine. You may remember Catherine, where it was kind of like climbing up a tower, and then obviously it had like a certain kind of prize at the top of the tower where you will probably try and survive or something like that. But in this game, there's actually some form of reward, some form of special treasure. Hopefully it's not like No Man's Sky, where it just shoves you right to the beginning again or something like that. But supposedly there is actually something at the top, and the whole point of the game is to actually get to the top. Now, obviously you die at the start of this game, as you saw there, but the game is actually kind of interesting in the story in that you're actually in a video arcade playing a video game within a video game. So obviously we're playing a video game, we're actually being talked to by the Grim Reaper, the actual Grim Reaper, which has been nicely kind of depicted here by Suda51 and Grasshopper Manufacture, and you're basically, it's kind of like what do you call him? It's kind of like Deadpool in a sense, where it's kind of like breaking the fourth wall, where he's talking to you within a video arcade where you're playing a video game, but you're then going to play a video game with him called Let It Die. So initially a lot of people thought it was this kind of like survival horror thing where you were kind of like playing an actual intended kind of real world in a sense, but you know, you're not actually. The actual main twist, which you've ended up saving until the release of this game, is that you're actually playing a video game in a video game arcade while sitting with the Grim Reaper, which I think is so crazy and awesome and very, very imaginative. And it's this thing as well where if you want to, say, quit out of the game, you actually have to go into your hub world, then go into the video game arcade. You have to turn the video game off while you're playing this video game to quit the game out, or your character will die in the world and stuff, which I think is really cool as well. So it has this kind of thing where it makes you still remember that you're playing a video game. But on the concept of the game itself and how the loot and everything works, is that you're never kind of like keeping loot like at any time, which is very, very cool. So basically, like, it's not kind of like, say, again, like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, where you get like a weapon and you stick with it with your playstyle. Everything in this game breaks. Everything feels very, very weak and very lacking in durability. So like, say if you get an axe and you think, oh, that axe is really awesome, I'm going to keep this axe, it's really, really badass. A lot of these weapons actually have maybe about 10 hits in them, and then they will break. And then you basically have to find another weapon and then learn to use that one until that one breaks. And you can actually have quite a few of them on your person. As you can see here, you have a left and right hand, and you can actually mix them up. So you can have two-handed weapons, you can have two baseball bats if you want, or you can have like a steam TNT mine, and then you can have a baseball bat or a hammer or a knife, anything you want. And then basically what you do is you use those weapons to defeat enemies, gain experience, and also efficiency with those weapons over time. But again, those weapons will break. And then that is kind of like where the crafting system comes into it. So we're actually fighting a boss here as well, just so you know. This is actually a mini boss. The actual main bosses have their own narratives and cutscenes. Again, really high production values when it comes to this game. But when it comes to, say, like the loot and everything like that as well, the freemium kind of like aspect of this game is that you end up having to craft these weapons, find blueprints in the world, which are very, very easy to use. So again, very accessible, doesn't make you feel like you're kind of like forced to grind or anything like that. And what you do is you find these blueprints which allows you to build these weapons with in-game cash, which is very easy to acquire too, like when you defeat these bosses or even certain enemies. You make thousands of gold coins in this game, and it pretty much costs, like, I think for a metal baseball bat, it costs like 2,000 cash. And you make maybe 2,000 cash from, say, about just maybe like a room of enemies, you know, which is kind of cool. So it's this thing where, like, you don't feel like you're grinding, like, constantly. It feels like you're getting rewarded for your progression, which is very, very nice. But then when you use this cash to actually like make weapons and stuff, you then have to wait for them to kind of like be made. So like if you have to research, say, like a weapon that has like full durability, it'll take maybe 2 minutes and then that is it. That is done. It doesn't take like 2 hours or anything like that, which is quite cool. And the other kind of thing with that is that you can obviously kind of like rush the research with weapons, so maybe weapons later on will take a lot longer, and then you can use in-game currency that has been bought through microtransactions to kind of rush that along. And it's not a thing of, oh, buy this and you'll become more powerful. It's never that, because none of the weapons last long enough for them to actually have that kind of usability or exclusivity in a sense. So it's one of those things where you're constantly kind of like, even like with the high durability weapons, they will still break very quickly over time. They'll just give you maybe about an extra 10 hits with those weapons, you know? And it's the same with things like clothing as well, like your clothing is your armor, but even when you get hits, that breaks over time as well. So if you find a really cool hat, don't get kind of attached to that hat, because it will break eventually when you take damage, and you will take damage in this game, because again, the point of this game is to kind of die, which is kind of cool. There is actually a massive multiplayer aspect to this game, which I'll try and gloss over very quickly, and then go into more in-depth kind of like, you know, talking when it comes to another video. But when it comes to, say, dying in this game, you actually end up losing your character, which might be very worrying to you. Again, this game is very roguelike, so with this character I'm playing right here, if she dies in the game, then that means I lose her. It means that she's gone forever. But you can actually use a currency in this game called death metal. Now, if you use, I think it's 1 death metal coin, it means that you can actually bring your character back from the dead and keep all the loot that you had on them. But it's one of those things where, again, you need to use cash that you actually have to purchase with real money. Now, the very awesome thing, again, is that Suda51 and Graphic Manufacturer have ended up making it so that the kind of like microtransaction cash, like that stuff that kind of like brings this game into like the freemium kind of like spectrum. Again, you can see like you're losing your armor and stuff and you get damaged, is that you actually gain that money by actually playing the game standard as well. There's actually a quest system in this game where it's basically just kill about 10 different enemies, you know, and then you'll get some kind of reward. And a lot of the time you actually gain that death metal just by playing the game and completing those quests. And again, it's just by playing the game. It's like really, really progressive. It's this thing where you are just kind of like going through the dungeons and fighting these enemies, and slowly over time you will actually make that money by just playing the game. Like, you can go through maybe about 4 dungeons and you will get maybe about 4 death metal. That's 4 lives for your character. And you will progressively make those over time. You can use that death metal again to rush things like research and stuff as well. So the game is very accessible, very welcoming, and in a way counterproductive to its own kind of money-making scheme, because it's not trying to make you spend money. It's actually making you want to play the game. So the developers have kind of acknowledged this and kind of like respected the player, expected the people that are actually using this game to gain some form of enjoyment. It's not this kind of thing where they're trying to make you grind for cash or anything. Like, you do have to kind of like level up your character and stuff by going through these dungeons over and over again, but there is also this kind of like PvP system in it where basically if you die in the game, your character kind of like invades another person's world, and then you can, like, I don't know, make the game more difficult for them. So it kind of has that Dark Souls thing again where you can invade, but the only way that you can invade is if you die. And so, like, say, like, you're going to actually see now, I think you might have seen actually a little bit earlier on, that you'll come across these like AI characters with orange names. They are actually player characters. These are actually people who have actually ended up dying in their own game and they're actually appearing in your world, and they can actually kill you, and then you can actually allow them to gain your own like loot and cash and stuff like that. So you still get benefits if you die, and then because obviously your character will then invade someone else's world, and if they actually kill that character, then you actually end up gaining some loot from it, which is kind of useful, kind of awesome. So as you can see here, this is actually one of those characters, very high level, and so you've got to be very on your toes at all times, actually use the tactics, the abilities, the weapons at your disposal. So again, don't get too kind of attached to weapons or gadgets, as you can see here, throwing a poison mushroom, because you will have to use these things and you will lose them, and you have to try and regain them by finding them through exploring. So there are so many aspects to this game when it comes to especially the PvP, the single player, so much gameplay, and again, it's all free, and it's all really, really accessible and easy to use, and it doesn't take you long to like grind through it and stuff like that. There's a major other multiplayer factor to this game as well, which kind of reminds me a little bit of Metal Gear Solid 5's kind of like base invasion, stuff like that, so I will get into that into the future. But this has been some Let It Die, and I will bring you some more. So this comment section below, let me know what you think to it. But it has been me, Josh, aka Proxy, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao for now.